To say, some people call that drive, some call it obsession, some call it just being selfish and being not a very nice person.
What happens when some of Hollywood's biggest stars collide with one of cinema's most uncompromising directors? Martin Scorsese has built a legacy working with legends, but not every collaboration ends in harmony. In fact, some never even make it to the set.
Need people who are like-minded in a way, or exploring certain areas that you want to go to.
When it comes to cinema, few names carry the weight of Martin Scorsese. For over 50 years, his work has shaped the landscape of American filmmaking. From the raw grit of Taxi Driver to the excessive energy of The Wolf of Wall Street, Scorsese has never shied away from exploring the darker corners of human nature. His films are often intense, character-driven, and packed with emotional depth. But behind the scenes, Scorsese's reputation is just as formidable, and his process is known to be meticulous. And his expectations, particularly when it comes to performances, are famously high. Scorsese has built lasting creative partnerships with actors like Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio, relationships founded on trust, shared vision, and an almost obsessive commitment to character. But not every actor has thrived under his direction. Some found his style too intense, his demands too rigid, or his vision too narrow. In some cases, the actor-director relationship broke down completely, often for reasons that revealed deeper differences in how each person approached their craft. One such case involved James Caan. Known for his explosive presence and raw masculinity on screen, Caan seemed like a natural fit for Scorsese's style. Their potential collaboration in the mid-1970s was something many believed could be a perfect match. At the time, Caan had just delivered a breakout performance as Sonny Corleone in The Godfather, and Scorsese was developing a project titled Italian American, a personal character study based in New York's Little Italy. The idea of working with Caan intrigued Scorsese. He later remarked in an interview with Film Comment that Caan had an edge that felt authentic. There was something dangerous about Jimmy, he said, and had this authenticity I wanted. However, despite their mutual respect, creative friction appeared quickly. Caan reportedly brought his own ideas to the table, including rewriting portions of the dialogue during rehearsals. This clashed directly with Scorsese's vision. The director valued spontaneity and improvisation, but only within the framework he carefully laid out. Caan's more assertive approach reportedly led to a dramatic exchange during a rehearsal, where Scorsese became visibly frustrated. Crew members later described the moment as a volcanic tirade, marking a turning point in their working relationship. Speaking years later to The New Yorker, Caan reflected on the encounter by saying, "There's creative freedom, and then there's whatever the hell that was." The disagreement ultimately led to the collapse of the project. While Scorsese publicly cited creative differences, those close to the situation said the tension between the two men made collaboration impossible. Although both went on to have long and successful careers, they never worked together again. The brief encounter remains one of those classic what could have been moments in cinema history, where two strong artistic forces simply couldn't align. Another actor who experienced a challenging collaboration with Scorsese was Mark Wahlberg. The two worked together on the 2006 crime thriller The Departed, a film that would eventually win Scorsese's long-awaited Oscar for Best Director. Wahlberg was cast as Staff Sergeant Sean Dignam, a high-strung, foul-mouthed police officer with deep roots in Boston's culture. On the surface, it seemed like a role Wahlberg was made to play, tough, aggressive, and rooted in his own background. Scorsese initially praised Wahlberg's energy. In a Directors Guild interview, he mentioned that Wahlberg had the street credibility he was looking for, but as production moved forward, things got complicated. Scorsese reportedly wanted the character to have more layers, a quieter internal emotional life beneath all the shouting and swearing. Wahlberg, however, leaned heavily into the character's aggression, staying true to his instincts. Tension reportedly reached a boiling point during the shooting of Dignam's office scenes. According to a production assistant who spoke to Vanity Fair, Scorsese kept calling for retakes, asking Wahlberg to do less when the actor felt the character demanded more. The director was looking for a kind of restrained intensity, while Wahlberg was delivering full-force bravado. These differing views on the character's emotional tone caused a noticeable strain. Despite the behind-the-scenes tension, Wahlberg's performance was widely praised, even earning him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Interestingly, it was the only acting nomination the film received, and according to some sources, the recognition came as a surprise to Scorsese. Publicly, both men remained professional, appearing at events together and promoting the film, but insiders noted that Wahlberg was not considered for future Scorsese projects like Shutter Island or The Wolf of Wall Street, both of which would have been logical fits for his talents. Years later, in a casual conversation with film students at NYU, Scorsese reportedly commented on the situation by saying, "Sometimes an actor gives you exactly what audiences want, rather than what the character needs." It was a subtle but clear reference to the difficulties he had experienced working with actors whose instincts didn't match his own. These stories are not about talent or star power. Both Caan and Wahlberg are clearly talented actors, each with a strong track record and devoted fan base. Instead, what stands out in these examples is the role of artistic compatibility. Scorsese is not a director who adapts his vision to fit the actor. He expects the actor to fully buy into his world, to commit to the process, the nuance, and the emotional layers he's aiming to uncover. When that kind of alignment happens, the result is often electric. When it doesn't, the friction becomes hard to ignore. It's also worth noting that Scorsese's expectations are not about control for its own sake. His directing style often involves deep discussions, character exploration, and trust. Actors like De Niro and DiCaprio have praised his ability to push them beyond what they thought they could do, but that same intensity can be overwhelming for performers who prefer more autonomy or who work in a different rhythm. There's also a broader context here, how different actors are trained and how they prepare for roles. Wahlberg, for instance, often relies on instinct and lived experience. He doesn't come from a traditional acting school background, which can sometimes lead to conflicts with directors who work in a more academic or process-driven way. Caan, similarly, was known for a strong-willed approach that could clash with directors who wanted complete control over the tone of a scene. What these stories underline is the fine balance required in actor-director collaborations, especially when the director's vision is as specific as Scorsese's. The stories of James Caan and Mark Wahlberg show that even when everything seems like a perfect fit on paper, talent, role, experience, it can all fall apart in practice if the creative philosophies don't match. The resulting friction can lead to missed opportunities, professional distance, and in some cases, lingering questions about what kind of performance might have emerged under different circumstances. In the world of filmmaking, chemistry between a director and actor isn't just a bonus. It's often the deciding factor in whether a project reaches its full potential. With Martin Scorsese, that chemistry has to include not just respect and communication, but also an alignment of values when it comes to the craft of storytelling. Without that alignment, even the most promising collaboration can come undone before it ever fully takes shape. As one of the most influential directors in modern cinema, Martin Scorsese has long been associated with intense storytelling, emotional complexity, and precise craftsmanship. He's a filmmaker whose vision is often rooted in character authenticity, historical detail, and layered emotional nuance. But this precision has occasionally clashed with actors whose strengths lie in other areas, particularly those more attuned to contemporary instincts or traditional star power. In some cases, these creative mismatches occurred early in the casting process, long before a film even began production. Two notable examples are Julia Roberts and Ryan O'Neal, both well-established names in Hollywood, yet both ultimately found themselves out of sync with Scorsese's method. Julia Roberts, at the height of her fame in the early 1990s, was considered for the role of Countess Ellen Olenska in The Age of Innocence. The film, based on the novel by Edith Wharton, required a performance steeped in subtlety and the social constraints of the Gilded Age. Scorsese, known for his obsession with detail and emotional authenticity, saw something intriguing in Roberts' charisma. Her on-screen presence was undeniable, and her expressive style could have brought a unique dimension to the role. Years later, he acknowledged, in an interview with Film Quarterly, that she had this luminous quality, which initially attracted him. However, as development moved forward, the gap between Roberts' acting instincts and Scorsese's expectations began to widen. The director's historical dramas often require actors to fully commit not just to a role, but to the physical and psychological discomfort of the period being portrayed. In this case, it meant strict adherence to corsets, speech patterns, and body language of 1870s New York aristocracy. For Roberts, this presented a challenge. During a costume fitting, she reportedly questioned the need for such restrictive clothing, expressing concern about how it impacted her ability to breathe and move naturally. For Scorsese, this discomfort was the point, an essential part of how the character's repression would be communicated on screen. Roberts later alluded to this experience in a roundtable conversation with a Hollywood reporter, though she didn't mention Scorsese by name. She spoke about a director who insisted that she literally not breathe properly in order to better understand the limitations of her character. This idea, sometimes referred to as method directing, didn't sit well with her more intuitive approach. For Scorsese, though, the authenticity of the period was non-negotiable. He later told the New York Times that in period pieces, "I need actors who can disappear into another time, not ones who make other times feel like our own." The situation reportedly came to a head during a discussion about the character's cultural background and emotional motives. Differences in interpretation created an atmosphere that was, by most accounts, tense and unsustainable. Roberts eventually withdrew from the project, and the role was recast with Michelle Pfeiffer, whose restrained performance was widely praised. Industry insiders often refer to the incident as an example of how even two accomplished professionals can find themselves at odds when their creative processes don't align. While there was no public fallout, the two never worked together again, and the project became a reference point in discussions about the limits of artistic compatibility. Ryan O'Neal's experience was different in structure but similar in theme. In the late 1970s, O'Neal was considered for the lead role in Raging Bull, before Robert De Niro was officially cast. At that time, O'Neal was a bankable Hollywood star, known for his work in films like Love Story, Barry Lyndon, and Paper Moon. His appeal lay in his charm, screen presence, and conventional good looks, qualities that had made him a popular leading man, but Scorsese wasn't looking for a typical hero. The character of Jake LaMotta, a deeply flawed and often violent boxer, required a performance that leaned into discomfort, ambiguity, and moral complexity. O'Neal was reportedly invited to a private audition or script discussion at Scorsese's New York office in 1978. According to editor Thelma Schoonmaker, who later recounted the event in an interview, the session quickly became awkward. O'Neal appeared to struggle with the material, treating the script as something unfamiliar, even foreign. The tension escalated when he suggested altering or softening certain scenes, particularly those involving domestic abuse, to make the character more sympathetic to audiences. From O'Neal's perspective, this made sense. He believed audiences needed a way to connect with the character emotionally. But for Scorsese, this suggestion revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of the story's intent. "If you're worried about likability, you're in the wrong room," Scorsese reportedly said before ending the meeting. While O'Neal never publicly confirmed the encounter in full detail, he made vague references to it in his memoir, writing that, "Some directors want raw ugliness. I've always believed audiences need a reason to care." That line neatly sums up the difference in philosophy. Scorsese was aiming for a brutal, unvarnished portrait of a man consumed by rage and self-destruction. O'Neal, trained and marketed as a star, was more focused on crafting a character that viewers could engage with on an emotional level. The idea of likability in characters has long been a point of debate in acting and directing. Some directors believe that audiences don't need to like a character to find them compelling, they just need to understand them. Scorsese clearly falls into this camp. His protagonists are often flawed, morally ambiguous, or outright destructive, yet their stories remain gripping. O'Neill's hesitance to fully lean into that darkness highlighted a creative rift that couldn't be bridged. As Scorsese later told American Film, "There's a difference between movie stars and what I need. I need actors willing to be despised." These kinds of differences are not about right or wrong, but about compatibility. Julia Roberts and Ryan O'Neal are undeniably talented performers who have succeeded in roles that align with their strengths. Their careers speak for themselves. But Scorsese's process demands a particular kind of actor, someone who's willing to step into a world defined entirely by the director's vision, even when that world is uncomfortable or unflattering. In both of these examples, it's clear that the clashes weren't personal, they were professional. Scorsese wasn't rejecting the actors as people, but rather identifying a disconnect in how they approached storytelling. Roberts brought a contemporary, intuitive style that didn't fit with the historical texture Scorsese was trying to build. O'Neal, meanwhile, brought a star-driven instinct that clashed with the gritty realism Scorsese needed for Raging Bull. In both cases, the mismatches led to quick, decisive partings that were rarely discussed in public, but quietly understood within the industry. What these stories illustrate is that even the most successful actors are not always the right fit for every director. Chemistry between actor and director is not just about shared goals, but about shared methods. For Scorsese, who immerses himself in research, emotional layering, and technical precision, it's essential that the actors he works with are on the same page. When that alignment doesn't happen, it's often easier to part ways than to try and force a collaboration that may not yield the intended results. The outcomes of these near misses also offer insight into Scorsese's creative discipline. Rather than compromise his approach to accommodate a star's preferences, he has consistently chosen to stay true to the story he wants to tell. In the case of The Age of Innocence, Pfeiffer delivered a performance that matched the film's tone and period, while Raging Bull became a landmark film largely due to De Niro's uncompromising portrayal of LaMotta. These casting decisions, difficult though they may have been, ultimately strengthened the final products. The stories of Roberts and O'Neal remind us that even in a collaborative medium like film, not all partnerships are meant to be. For Scorsese, maintaining the integrity of the story has always taken precedence over attaching big names or chasing box office guarantees. His commitment to detail and emotional authenticity means that only certain actors, those who can fully immerse themselves in his world, are truly compatible with his vision. And that, more than anything, is what separates his work from the more conventional paths of mainstream cinema. In many films, the tension between character and performance happens quietly, shaped and refined through hours of rehearsal, discussion, and trust between actor and director. But occasionally that tension becomes the story itself, a central force behind the scenes that influences not just the final performance, but the creative process as a whole. One of the most quietly significant examples of this kind of friction in Martin Scorsese's career occurred during the making of The Age of Innocence, specifically in his collaboration with Winona Ryder. While the film would go on to receive critical acclaim and Ryder herself earned an Oscar nomination, their creative relationship on set was marked by conflicting interpretations, emotional strain, and a level of intensity that ultimately prevented future collaboration. Set in the rigid, rule-bound world of 1870s New York high society, The Age of Innocence required a delicate balance of restraint and emotional complexity. Scorsese's adaptation of Edith Wharton's novel was unlike his usual urban dramas filled with crime and chaos. Instead, it was a slow-burning character piece, driven by unspoken feelings and the social codes that silently control people's lives. The story revolves around a love triangle between Newland Archer, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, the free-spirited Countess Eleanor Lenska, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, and May Welland, a seemingly innocent young woman from a powerful family, portrayed by Ryder. At first glance, Ryder was a natural choice for May. She brought a youthful elegance and emotional subtlety that fit the film's tone. Scorsese himself later acknowledged in a film comment retrospective that she had a luminescent quality that worked beautifully on camera. But as the filming progressed, it became clear that their interpretations of May Welland were not aligned. For Ryder, May was not simply a naive, well-mannered socialite. She saw her as a young woman aware of the game being played around her, someone whose actions, while couched in innocence, were deeply strategic. Ryder wanted to humanize May, to explore her vulnerability and internal conflict. Scorsese, on the other hand, envisioned May as a product of her world, a character who embodied the precise codes and unspoken expectations of her social class. He believed that showing too much awareness or emotional openness would undermine the dramatic tension that came from May's carefully controlled facade. Their differing views came to a head during the filming of a pivotal scene, the formal engagement dinner at the van der Luden's mansion. It's a moment loaded with unspoken tension, as May secures her place in Newland's life, gently cutting off any possibility of his continued closeness with Eleanor Lenska. According to members of the production team, the filming of that scene was unusually prolonged. Production reportedly paused for nearly 6 hours as Scorsese worked with Ryder between takes, trying to shape a specific performance that conveyed what he called innocent manipulation. Production designer Dante Ferretti later recalled that Scorsese would pull Ryder aside and speak with her privately for long stretches, sometimes 20 or 30 minutes at a time. Ryder would then return to set with red eyes, perform another take, and often be asked to do it again. This process, repeated throughout the day, made it clear that they were struggling to reach common ground. Despite the tension, the results were undeniable. Ryder's performance as May carries the kind of quiet strength and emotional ambiguity that anchors the film's central dilemma. But for those on set, the working relationship between Ryder and Scorsese was visibly strained. Crew members noted that their communication became more limited as filming went on, particularly during the film's final act, when May reveals her pregnancy. A moment that seals the story's emotional closure. Script supervisor Martha Pinson later shared in a Sight and Sound interview that the director was looking for a very particular tone in those scenes. He wanted something so specific, she said. This perfect synthesis of Victorian propriety masking ruthless emotional warfare. Ryder, in contrast, seemed to be reaching for a more human, empathetic portrayal, an effort to explore what May might have been feeling beneath the surface, rather than what she was projecting outward. This subtle difference in approach reflects a deeper philosophical divide in how both artists view character construction. For Ryder, understanding the emotional reality of the character was key to delivering a compelling performance. For Scorsese, that internal understanding had to remain invisible, felt, but never shown too plainly. The result of their collaboration was critically praised. Ryder's performance earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, and The Age of Innocence became one of Scorsese's most celebrated departures from his usual themes. However, signs of the creative tension were evident in how the film was later presented. Ryder did not participate in the director's commentary or behind-the-scenes promotional activities. She also made no public statements about her working experience on the film, beyond standard interviews. When asked years later about the possibility of working with her again, Scorsese's answer was strikingly brief. "Winona is brilliant at certain qualities," he said. "May Welland required something else entirely." While neither party ever spoke publicly in detail about the conflict, those close to the production have hinted that it left a lasting impression. Costume designer Sandy Powell, who collaborated with Scorsese on several films, once remarked that sometimes the process of reaching a great performance is so difficult that you can't imagine repeating it, even when the result works on screen. That observation, subtle but telling, encapsulates the complicated nature of artistic collaboration. Success doesn't always mean harmony, and a strong performance doesn't always signal creative alignment. What makes this story particularly compelling is how it reveals the fine balance that Scorsese seeks in his actors. He doesn't just want a performance that works, he wants one that reflects the intricate emotional layers he sees in the script. He directs with a focus on subtext, atmosphere, and internal conflict. To do that effectively, he often needs actors who are willing to surrender their own instincts in favor of his broader vision. For some performers, that's an inspiring challenge. For others, it can feel restrictive or emotionally exhausting. Scheider's experience on The Age of Innocence is not unique in Scorsese's filmography. Similar tensions have arisen with other actors who found his level of involvement and precision overwhelming. But what makes this particular case stand out is that it occurred within a film defined by silence, restraint, and control. Unlike his more explosive works, this was a story built on what characters don't say and can't do, making the subtleties of performance all the more critical. Every glance, every breath, every pause had to convey something deeper. That level of scrutiny can create brilliance, but it can also create stress. In hindsight, both Scorsese and Ryder gained something valuable from the experience. The film remains a standout in both of their careers. For Ryder, it demonstrated her ability to carry emotionally complex roles in mature dramas. For Scorsese, it expanded his range as a director and showed his capacity to work within different genres and historical periods. Yet the collaboration was never repeated, and their professional paths never crossed again. That quiet separation speaks volumes about the emotional toll that such a demanding creative process can take. Ultimately, the story of Winona Ryder and The Age of Innocence is not one of failure, but of divergence. It's a reminder that behind every performance, there are layers of interpretation, negotiation, and occasionally conflict. In Scorsese's world, the pursuit of a perfect performance often comes with personal cost. Not because of ego or drama, but because of an unrelenting drive for emotional truth. And sometimes that truth comes at the price of comfort, agreement, or ongoing collaboration. Some creative partnerships never make it to set. They unfold quietly, often in the early stages of development, where ambition and vision first collide. These moments don't usually become public, and when they do, they're remembered as footnotes or what could have been scenarios in film history. But when the director is Martin Scorsese and the actor is Jim Carrey, two singular talents known for their intensity and commitment, those footnotes become compelling stories about the unpredictable chemistry of collaboration. In the late 1990s, Jim Carrey was at a high point in his career. He had already proven himself as a box office draw with comedies like Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Liar Liar. But by the end of the decade, he was taking creative risks that surprised many. His performances in The Truman Show and Man on the Moon showed a side of him that was more serious, more nuanced, and far more emotionally complex than what audiences had seen before. Carrey wasn't just being funny, he was trying to say something deeper. It was during this period that his name became attached to a project Martin Scorsese had been developing for years, a biopic about aviation tycoon and filmmaker Howard Hughes. At that stage, Scorsese's vision for the film was darker and more psychologically intense than the version that eventually became The Aviator in 2004. He wanted to explore Hughes not just as a public figure, but as a man battling his own mind, a study of genius unraveling under the weight of obsession, fear, and mental illness. Carrey, known for his physical expressiveness and emotional commitment, seemed like a bold but exciting choice. He had recently thrown himself into the role of Andy Kaufman, using method-like immersion that impressed critics and colleagues alike. Scorsese was intrigued. In an interview with Premiere magazine at the time, he said, "Jim has this manic energy that could capture Hughes's brilliant eccentricity." For a brief time, it seemed like the partnership might happen. Carrey joined the project in the early development phase and participated in an intensive character workshop at Scorsese's New York office. Production designer Dante Ferretti, who had worked with Scorsese on several films, was present during one of these sessions. According to Ferretti, Carrey arrived prepared, passionate, and full of ideas. He came in with a vision of Hughes that was dynamic and transformative. He reportedly proposed physically embodying Hughes at different stages of his life, using makeup, posture shifts, and even changes in vocal tone to reflect the character's deterioration over time. What followed was a clash of working styles. Cary, who often uses improvisation and spontaneous discovery as tools in his performances, began demonstrating ideas in real time, showing how Hughes might twitch, panic, or isolate himself. He performed scenes out loud, sometimes inventing lines on the spot, trying to find the emotional truth in the moment. But Scorsese's approach to filmmaking is different. He values rehearsal, yes, but once the camera rolls, he expects precision. His scripts are tightly structured, and his characters are often built over weeks or months of detailed conversations. There's room for exploration, but it has to happen within a clear framework. According to Ferretti, the room's atmosphere changed quickly. The temperature seemed to drop with each minute, he later told Film Architecture Quarterly. Scorsese, who had been excited by Caré's initial involvement, reportedly became quiet as the actor demonstrated his process. It wasn't that Caré lacked talent. In fact, Scorsese later referred to his brilliance as undeniable, but the kind of brilliance Caré brought, free-flowing, physical, unpredictable, didn't line up with how Scorsese constructs his films. The script demanded structure, the character demanded clarity. Caré, in trying to uncover something authentic, was moving in a direction that Scorsese wasn't comfortable following. The final turning point came when the discussion moved to dialogue. Caré expressed interest in reworking certain lines or adding new ones through improvisation. Scorsese, whose films often require precise verbal rhythm and subtext, was not open to altering the script in that way. According to a longtime producing partner, Barbara DeFina, Scorsese later summed up the issue by saying, "There are two kinds of brilliance in acting. Jim's is undeniable, but it's not compatible with my process." Not long after that, Caré quietly exited the project, and the film itself was put on hold. Eventually, The Aviator was revived with Leonardo DiCaprio in the lead role. The script was reworked, the tone adjusted, and the film released in 2004 to critical and commercial success. DiCaprio's performance as Hughes was restrained, intense, and grounded in a kind of slow-building madness that suited Scorsese's directing style. The two men had already built a strong working relationship, and the collaboration allowed Scorsese to shape the film exactly how he envisioned it. As for Caré, he went on to star in Bruce Almighty and continued balancing comedy with more serious work in films like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Years later, when asked about actors he wished he could have worked with, Scorsese made a subtle but revealing remark to a group of film students at NYU. He said, "Some actors are such singular artists that they create within their own universe. My films require actors who can fully inhabit mine." It was an elegant way of describing what had happened without placing blame or declaring failure. Caré himself took a philosophical view of the experience. In a 2015 interview, he reflected on the ups and downs of his career and spoke about missed opportunities as sometimes being blessings in disguise. "Sometimes the greatest gift is a door that remains closed," he said, adding that not every project, no matter how promising, is meant to happen. Their almost collaboration stands as a fascinating case study in how two creative giants, each successful in their own way, can still be fundamentally incompatible when it comes to process. It wasn't about ego, money, or fame. It was about the gap between how each artist finds truth in a character. For Scorsese, that truth is often rooted in structure, history, and layered psychology. For Caré, it comes through spontaneity, full-body commitment, and a kind of personal channeling of emotion. Both approaches can lead to incredible results, but when they pull in opposite directions, the project itself can't survive. This story also highlights a broader theme that has run through Scorsese's entire career. Whether it's James Caan, Mark Wahlberg, Julia Roberts, Ryan O'Neal, Winona Ryder, or Jim Carrey, the actors who've struggled in his orbit tend to be those with their own strong creative instincts, those who come to the table with a vision of their own. In many ways, this is a testament to their talent, but it's also a reminder that in Scorsese's world, the director's vision is the compass. He isn't looking for actors to reinvent the story, he's looking for actors who are willing to immerse themselves in it completely. This level of control doesn't work for everyone. Some actors need space to breathe, to experiment, to find the character through trial and error. Others thrive under detailed direction and a clear map of where the character is going. When those two philosophies meet in harmony, the results can be extraordinary. But when they don't, even the most promising collaboration can dissolve before it begins. Few relationships in cinema are as defining as those between directors and actors. In Scorsese's case, these relationships often become intense creative partnerships built on trust and mutual understanding. But for the 6 actors we've examined, those who clashed or failed to align with his methods, the experience reveals something deeper about the nature of artistic compatibility. It's not just about talent, it's about process, philosophy, and the ability to surrender to a vision that might not match your own. In a film industry increasingly shaped by data, audience testing, and compromise, Scorsese's refusal to bend his artistic standards remains both admirable and rare. The tensions he's encountered with actors are not flaws in his process, they're part of what makes his work so distinctive. Because in his world, real artistry doesn't come from meeting halfway. It comes from conviction, patience, and the willingness to pursue something precise, even if it means walking away from brilliant collaborators who simply speak a different creative language.